Welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. This is the podcast where the takes are hot, the facts are real, and the news this week is fully unhinged. Today, we're diving into a lineup of stories that honestly feels like they were written by a very chaotic group chat, not actual reality. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court stepping into LGBTQ plus lives in a way that has people asking if free speech now includes psychological harm, something we've talked about before. There is a political scandal that is giving double life, secret chat rooms, and hypocrisy at Olympic levels. We've got a president showing up to the Supreme Court like it is a front row seat at a Broadway show while arguing to redefine who gets to be an American. We have a story that takes a very dark turn into questions about justice, accountability, and what happens when politics and reality collide. And an extra special story that I added very last minute because I'm not sure if you're aware, but the Pussycat Dolls have returned. And we need to talk about that because shockingly, that is also getting a little bit political. And the Pussycat Dolls were like not my gay awakening, but they made me feel like a gay ass bitch in high school. So I needed to talk about this. So expectations for today's episode, we are breaking it all down. I'm going to give you the facts, the context, the history where it matters, and of course, the commentary that you came for. It's going to be informative, occasionally unfiltered, and as always, in the style of Hot Air. Before we jump in, make sure you are following me on Instagram and TikTok at _HotAirPod. Visit my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, to shop my merch, like my Hot Air t-shirt that I'm always wearing, and my Hot Air mug that I'm always drinking out of. You can also submit your listener stories, topic suggestions, and any questions you might have for me on my website as well. So get comfy, grab a drink because you might need it, and let's hit it. Part 1. Free speech, but make it traumatizing. So this week, the Supreme Court said, what if we made therapy even worse for you all? The United States Supreme Court, yes, the highest court in the land, the final boss of Are You Serious Right Now, just ruled 8-1 against Colorado's ban on conversion therapy for minors. I talked about this at length in a previous episode. I got into exactly what conversion therapy looks like and specifically talked about this case. So this vote, 8-1, means that it wasn't even close. This wasn't a controversial split decision. This was a we all got together and decided this is what we're doing kind of moment. And before anyone is like, wait, what even is conversion therapy? Well, great question, because the name itself is already doing a lot of PR work. I'm going to give you the lowdown. I'm going to give you like the real quick, Cliff Notes version, but you can go back to listen to my other episode if you want more info. Conversion therapy is the practice of trying to change someone's sexual orientation or gender identity. So, essentially, taking a queer kid and saying, hey, what if you just didn't do that? What if you were not into men and you're a man or whatever? And the entire global medical community has been like, absolutely not. This is harmful. This is dangerous. This is trauma with a clipboard. We're talking organizations like the American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, the United Nations, all saying the same thing, that this doesn't work and it causes real psychological damage. Depression, anxiety, increased risks of suicide. This is not fringe opinion. This is consensus from very educated, very smart people, something that the current administration would have no idea about. So naturally, the Supreme Court said, but what if it's just talking? That was the case that was brought up. Talk therapy as conversion therapy, because that's the argument, right? The case, Childs v. Salazar, basically came down to this idea that banning conversion therapy is actually banning speech, free speech, not medical treatment, not a harmful practice, just speech. And according to the majority opinion, if a licensed therapist is sitting in a room telling a queer minor that their identity is wrong and broken or needs to be fixed, that is protected under the First Amendment. And the only response I can have to that is because Jesus. No shit. And I need you all to sit with that for a hot second. If we regulate doctors all the time, You can't just walk into a medical office and have someone prescribe you your vibes and essential oils for cancer and call it oncology. We have standards, we have ethics, we have boards that will take your license so fast your stethoscope won't even hit the floor. But here, the court basically said, like, no, 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 this isn't treatment. This is conversation, which is wild because if I go to a therapist and they start talking, I'm pretty sure that's the whole service, right? Like, I'm not there for snacks. I'm not there for ambiance. I'm there because the talking is the treatment. And what's even more mind bending is that this wasn't just conservative justices, this was bipartisan. Liberal justices also signed onto the idea that the law was viewpoint discrimination, which is a very fancy legal way of saying we can't tell people what opinions they're allowed to express, even if those opinions are actively harming children. Justice Neil Gorsuch, I think that's how you say his name, y'all know me by now, I don't know names, wrote that the law censors speech based on its content and therefore violates the Constitution. Meanwhile, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, bless her, she was the only one that did not vote for it, was over in dissent, basically saying, are we really ignoring the actual harm happening here? Like, hello, because that's the disconnect. The court is operating in this abstract, philosophical, like, what is speech kind of realm, while kids are sitting in rooms being told they are wrong at their core. And let's be real, those justices are all heterosexual, cisgender people. Like, thank God we have some people of color in there, but they don't have that life experience. They don't have the lived experience of a gay man or a gay woman or somebody who is trans that is just trying to survive. That feeling at our core, those people that are making these decisions have no idea what it is like to feel that way. Very similarly to men making choices for women's bodies, we have a bunch of straight motherfuckers making choices for gay people. And this is where I start getting heated. And also, this is where it gets bigger than just Colorado, because there are nearly 30 states with similar bans. That's a lot of states, people. So this ruling doesn't just stay cute and local. It has the potential to unravel protections across the entire country. It opens the door for challenges everywhere. It reframes conversion therapy not as a medical issue, but as a free speech issue. And once you do that, it's kind of game over, because now you're not debating science, you're debating the Constitution. And I think what's really sinister about this is the rebranding, because nobody's walking around calling it conversion therapy, at least not as much anymore. It's all exploratory therapy or faith-based counseling or just helping you find your truth. And it's like, okay, super. But why is the truth always fucking straight? Why is the journey always one direction? This isn't self-discovery. It's a one-way street with a very specific destination to Straight Town, and Straight Town has no color and is boring as fucking balls. There's also this quote from Gerard Conley, who wrote Boy Erased, which I've also talked about before, about his experience with conversion therapy, where he said this ruling reduces identity to just beliefs. And that kind of hit me, because that's exactly what's happening. It's the idea that queerness is something that you think, not something that you are. And if it's just a thought, well, then, of course, we can talk you out of it. Except what they don't seem to realize is they can't. Like, we've tried. Society has tried. Families have tried. Religion has tried. And, well, guess what? News fucking flash. Queer people are still here. We're still existing. We are still thriving, still making better playlists than everyone else. So what we're really talking about is not free speech. We are talking about whose speech gets protected and at whose expense. The speech of the therapist is being protected, but the safety of a child, that's suddenly negotiable. And I just need to say this, because it's driving me absolutely insane. If a therapist told a kid, you are worthless, you are broken, you need to change who you are, in literally any other context, we would call that abuse. We would revoke licenses. We would shut it down. But if you wrap it in religion or call it identity exploration, suddenly it's constitutionally protected. And this is coming at a great time because it was Easter yesterday. I'm recording this the day after. It's like, Jesus be everywhere. And the math, honey, is not mathing. So that's where we are in the year 2026. The Supreme Court has essentially said you can't ban harmful therapy if it's just words. That leaves the door very wide open. And it's like words are the whole thing. Words are the weapon, words are the mechanism, words are the trauma. And I don't know, maybe I missed the memo, but I thought the point of progress was to move forward, not to circle back to have you tried maybe not being gay? Did you try that yet? Yeah, let's try it again. Because if that is the vibe, we are in trouble, people. Big trouble. Part 2. Family values, but make it fetish. I know you didn't think that I was going to completely ignore this story. And honestly, at first when I saw it come out, I felt bad. I did. I was like, this poor man is being outed as this bimbo fetish. And I'm like, look at him. He's living his dream. He's got these tiggled bitties. They are huge. They're cute. Look at those puppies. He is lucky his wife, Kristi Noems, didn't shoot him in the chest. Those puppies are cute and huge and gigantic. I can't even with this. There's no way I could gloss over this, but I needed to wait for this episode to talk about it. And obviously, you know what I'm talking about. This story is layered. It's ironic. It's hypocrisy at its core. It's a little bit camp. This is Ryan Murphy limited series waiting to happen. This is going to inspire so many TV shows. So let's talk about Kristi Noems' husband. As you probably know, Kristi Noem, former governor, political figure, very loud about traditional values, not exactly a pride parade regular, very much the protect the children, family values, anti-LGBTQ plus legislation energy. That's kind of her brand. She also wears very big hats and looks like a fucking clown all the time. So imagine everyone's surprise when her husband, Bryon Noem, gets exposed for allegedly participating in online fetish communities, specifically Bimbofication. Who knew? And he was cross-dressing with fake breasts on, sending tens of thousands of dollars to models. So perhaps that's where Kristi Noem was funneling those millions of dollars to those new firms that she had contact with when she was making her fucking commercials. Maybe they were actually just going to her husband's Bimbofication fetish. Who knows? What? I'm sorry, what is happening? We've seen things like this time and time again, but you can't build a political identity on calling things morally wrong and then have your husband logging into a chat room where your username is probably something like Busty Barbie 69 and expect nobody to notice. The duality is breathtaking. It's fucking insane. And let's be clear here, because nuance matters. There's nothing inherently wrong with cross-dressing. That's why I felt bad. There is nothing inherently wrong with exploring gender expression or having a fetish. Adults are allowed to be weird. In fact, I encourage it. Life is short, be strange. As long as you are not doing anything illegal with someone who is underage, live your dream. Just don't commit any crimes. The issue is not the behavior. The issue is the hypocrisy. While on one side of your life, you're saying, this kind of expression is dangerous, it's immoral, it shouldn't be allowed in your children, and you're villainizing and demonizing trans people, then the other side, you're actively participating in it privately, secretly, and apparently not very securely, because the man did not even use a burner identity properly. If you're going to live a double life, at least be good at it. And then this is where it shifts from scandalous to actually concerning, because there are real questions about security. When you have someone connected to a high-level political figure engaging in explicit online activity, potentially sending large amounts of money, not hiding their identity well at all, that opens the door to, blackmail, to manipulation, to exploitation. So now it's not just haha, I gotcha. It's, wait, is this a national security issue? Is your Bimbofication creating a national security issue for us all? And when reporters reached out for comment, his response was, kind of iconic, honestly. He said, today is not the day. Actually, unfortunately, it is the day. It's very much the day. It is, in fact, the exact fucking day. And then, of course, the political reactions start rolling in. Some people are clutching their pearls. Others are pointing out the obvious hypocrisy. And honestly, the internet is doing what the internet does best, which is turning it into memes within seconds. But underneath the chaos, there's a very real pattern here, because how many times have we seen this? Public figures who are aggressively anti-LGBTQ and then behind the scenes engaging in the very things they condemn. like tale as old as time. We've seen it over and over and over again. It raises the question, is this about morality or is it about control and, of course, a little bit of money? If it were really about morality, the standard would apply across the board, but it doesn't. It's selective, it's performative, it's rules for thee, not for me. And I think what's particularly fascinating about this specific case is the bimbofication angle. Like, honestly didn't even know that was a thing because it's such an exaggerated form of femininity. It's hyper feminine, over the top, it's cartoonish, and yet that's the space that he chose to explore. And then it makes you think, no wonder Kristi Noem does not look like her pictures from 10, 15 years ago. That bitch tried to bimbofication herself. And I just have to say this, when this all came out, I already said that I felt a little bad about it. Like, I can't imagine how humiliating it is, regardless of your political affiliation, to have pictures like that of you floating around the world and people sharing them. Everyone and their mother's goldfish has seen that now. And my instant reaction, beyond being like, oh, poor guy, that kind of sucks, and then also being like, haha, Kristi Noem, you were such a cunt, this is what you get, was that there is like nothing worse in culture, in the world, like not just American culture, than a quote unquote straight man like exploring his sexuality. And then make that man a conservative straight man exploring his sexuality. Even worse, make that a conservative man who is married to Kristi Noem exploring his sexuality. Like, there's nothing worse on the planet. That's not true. There's a lot of worse things on the planet, but you know what I mean. Like, every Republican's world just fell apart. And that's the problem with our society, is that men have to be so masculine, women can be feminine. That's why there's so much divide, where everyone's confused about being trans or being queer or being fluid or non-binary. It's like, God forbid, in the privacy of his home, he puts on those tiggle bitties and is just having a good time. Like, let the man live. But that is so demonized that people have to hide that behind closed doors, keep it to themselves, and then out in public be so anti what they actually are in the closet. That's the bigger problem here. And that's why I felt bad, because this man he probably isn't even straight. Let's be real. He probably highly likely might be trans. Like, I don't want to put a label on it or anything, but like, I imagine there's some part of him that wants to feel a certain way. And even if he isn't, there's a shitload of men that cross dress. It's just for fun. They get off. Again, if they're not killing anybody, they're not molesting anybody, raping anybody, committing a crime that they are with, if they're doing it with other people, that they are of age and consenting, like, go at it. So it makes all the rhetoric about protecting traditional gender roles like feel even more ironic, is really what I'm trying to say. Like, clearly the lines are a lot blurrier in private than they are in public. That's it. I'm not here to shame it. I'm not here to shame him and his life. Like, do your thing, live your truth, put on a wig, wear the heels, send the money if that is your journey. Also, allegedly, the person he was paying was an immigrant worker and they outed him. So also a little bit iconic and ironic. But you cannot actively work to limit other people's freedom to express themselves while secretly indulging in your own version of that expression and or having your husband do it. That's not values. That's branding, and bad fucking branding, Kristi. Get your shit together. So that's the story. Family values, but make it fetish. And if you wrote this in a script, people would say that it is too on the nose, too obvious, too unrealistic. But here we are. This is the reality that we are living in. And karma is a bitch. It always comes to get you, sometimes not in the way that you think it is. But when you are actively hunting down immigrants, when you are actively demonizing anyone who is othered, and now you're asking for privacy when you have taken away the privacy of millions of people that were here working their asses off, well, Kristi, you had it coming. Part 3. Trump takes the Supreme Court. Like, literally. I need you to really lean in for this one, because this isn't just what the fuck news. This is history happening in real time with, a little side dish of cuckoo. So picture this. The United States Supreme Court, marble columns, silent room, no cameras, no applause, just 9 justices, a handful of lawyers, and then suddenly, like it's opening night at the Dolby Theater, the President of the United States walks in and takes a front row seat. That is what happened. Donald Trump just became the first sitting president in U.S. history to attend Supreme Court oral arguments in person. not send a statement, not watch from the White House. He showed up, sat down, red tie, front row, watching the justices debate his policy like it's live theater, which, in my opinion, is kind of an intimidation tactic. But honestly, the visual alone is insane. There's this long-standing unspoken rule in American politics. Separation of powers isn't just legal, it's vibes. Presidents don't hover over the court while it decides their cases. That's just like not the energy that we've come to see. And Trump said, like, what if I just ignore that entirely, as he often does with everything else that's come before him? So now we have the most powerful person in the country just sitting there, physically present, while the court debates whether he can fundamentally rewrite who gets to be American. Like, no pressure, Supreme Court. Like, I can guarantee he was like glaring at them, staring them down, thinking that he's like some mob boss that's just like intimidating. Like, what an absolute mess. But let's get into the actual case, because the substance here is just as wild as the optics. Trump is trying to end birthright citizenship, or at least dramatically limit it, through an executive order that he signed on his first day back in office. And the order is blunt. It says that if a child is born in the United States, they are not automatically a citizen unless at least one parent is a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident, which, just so we're clear, would be a complete rewrite of how citizenship has worked in this country for over 150 years. Because the current system comes from the 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868 after the Civil War. And that says, and I'm paraphrasing, but like not really, if you're born here, you're American, end of story. That interpretation was locked in by the Supreme Court in 1898 with United States v. Wong Kim Ark, which confirmed that even children born to non-citizen parents are citizens. Precedent, settled law, not controversial, like wipe your hands clean, whatever. Until now. Trump's entire argument hinges on one phrase: subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And his administration is saying, actually, maybe that doesn't apply to everyone. Specifically, they argue that it should exclude children of undocumented immigrants, children of people on temporary visas, basically anyone whose parents are not fully rooted in the US system. So suddenly, being born here is not enough. And the justices, they were not completely exactly buying it. During arguments, both conservative and liberal justices started pressing the administration's lawyer with questions like, okay, but how does this work in practice? And what about precedent? What about the Constitution? Literally saying the opposite? Like, what is happening here? Even Chief Justice Roberts, who is not exactly known for being chaotic, was raising concerns. And here's where it gets like just a little bit juicy. Trump didn't even stay for the whole thing. He showed up, sat front row, watched his lawyer argue, and then he dipped before the opposing side even got to speak. Weird move. You should have just stayed at fucking home or went golfing, which is very on brand for him. Like, it almost hurts. It's so on brand. Imagine going to a tennis match, cheering for one player, and then leaving before the other person even serves. You like watch their one serve. You're like, sweet, great, you got it. Maybe that was a bad analogy because tennis is back and forth, but you know what I mean. And of course, the drama does not stop there. After the hearing, Trump took to social media, as he does, and called the entire concept of birthright citizenship, in his words, stupid. Sir, that stupid concept has been constitutional law since the 1800s. He also argued that the 14th Amendment was originally intended only for the children of formerly enslaved people, not for immigrants today, which is a very selective reading of history. Because yes, the amendment was created in that context, but it was written broadly on purpose to prevent exactly this kind of selective citizenship. To say, if you're born here, you belong here, like, period. And now we're debating whether that still applies. And outside the court, protests, hundreds of people gathered, chanting, holding signs, basically saying like, hey, maybe don't redefine citizenship on a Tuesday. Like, can we not? Tuesdays is the day that hot air comes out. So, like, we'd rather be listening to that. Like, the stakes here are like pretty fucking big. If this order were upheld, it could affect around 250,000 children born every year in the US. And that is not theoretical. That's not abstract. That's real babies, real families, and real lives. Kids who would be born here, grow up here, go to school here, and then potentially not be considered American. And then what? Do they become stateless? Do they inherit citizenship from countries they've never even been to? Do we just like figure that out later? That's kind of a pattern here with the Trump administration. They don't really think ahead to like what next. They just do one little thing like this without thinking of the consequences or the ramifications. Like, this is the part of the conversation that gets glossed over: the logistics, the human impact, the fact that citizenship is not just a legal status, it's identity, it's belonging, access, safety, all the things. And what's wild is that even with a conservative leaning court, there was clear hesitation because this isn't just policy, it's constitutional bedrock. And courts tend to get a little nervous when you start pulling at the foundation of the Constitution. Now, at the time of writing this script, it was undecided. I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to have my other computer here so I can look these things up. But as I mentioned, this room is still getting set up, so it's still a little bit chaotic. But I'm pretty sure they voted against this, and it's going to remain as it is. But I could be mistaken. But let's pretend it hasn't been decided on, right? So, depending on how it goes, this could either reinforce 150 years of precedent or completely reshape what it means to be American. Like, no big deal, right? Either way, no big deal. Like, super. But of course, I will update you on a future episode, as I do. Part 4. Pardons, consequences, and then this. All right, friends, lock in for this one. This is another tale as old as time, because this is where the tone shifts from like chaotic and like slightly funny with my attitude to like, this is actually very dark. The kind of story where you're listening with the smirk and then you end up staring at the wall. Is like, oh no, 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 no. Here's what's going on. Also, little trigger warning. We are going to be discussing, what's the term I use? Sexual assaults or abuse of a minor. I mean, all I have to say is it's another MAGA person, right? Another Jan 6er. Here's what's going on. After returning to office, Donald Trump issued sweeping pardons to roughly 1,500 people connected to January 6th. And this wasn't some slow, careful case-by-case review where you comb through details and weigh remorse and evaluate risk. This was broad, fast, and clearly political. The messaging was basically, these people were treated unfairly. They are patriots. They deserve forgiveness. Clean slate. Fresh start. Out you go. And for a lot of his base, that was framed as justice being restored. Okay, whatever. That's the setup. Now, here's where it gets uncomfy. One of those individuals, one of many, this is this specific case, someone who had been involved in the January 6th riots and then received that presidential pardon, has now been sentenced in a completely separate case involving underage sexual abuse material. And I'm going to be very clear here because sometimes headlines soften things in a way that reality does not deserve. This was not a little tiny case. This was not a few little files. This was described by authorities as an enormous collection, reportedly more than 100,000 images and videos. 100 fucking thousand. That is not a mistake. That's not curiosity. Not that that is even a word that should be used in this circumstance. That is sustained, repeated, intentional behavior over time. That is a fucking pattern. That is a harm. That is harm at scale. And as if this wasn't already enough to process, there was actually an argument made by the defense that the presidential pardon should cover this too. Let that fucking sink in. The idea was that because the material was discovered during investigations connected to January 6th, it should fall under the umbrella of the pardon. And the court, thankfully, said absolutely the fuck not. Hard no. Judges have been very clear that pardons related to January 6th do not magically extend to unrelated criminal conduct, especially something like this. Because if that were the case, then what are we even doing here? What would the limit be? Where does accountability come back into the picture? So the result in this case was what you would expect: conviction, sentencing, consequences. But the reason that this matters and the reason that it's making headlines is because this isn't the first case like this. This is not the only instance where someone connected to those pardons has later been tied to additional criminal behavior. And that tells you a lot about him being the president and his supporters. There have been multiple reports of individuals facing new charges after being released, ranging from threats against public officials to violent crimes. And in at least one other case, another pardoned Jan 6er participant was later convicted in child sexual abuse cases involving minors. There's been more than two, let me be clear. So when you zoom out, this starts to look a lot less like a one-off and more like a pattern that raises uncomfortable questions. And before anyone jumps to conclusions, let's be precise because accuracy matters. This does not mean that every person who was pardoned is guilty of something else. That's not true. And that's not fair to kind of blanket statement them, even though they love to blanket statement us. But it does raise a very real issue about what happens when you issue pardons at that scale without individualized review. Because the justice system, at least in theory, is built on specifics. You have evidence, charges, trials, sentencing. It's supposed to be deliberate. It's supposed to be careful. And when you bypass that with a sweeping action, you're also accepting the risk that you may be releasing people who still pose a danger and have shown us that they still pose a danger. That's just reality. And now we're seeing examples where that risk has materialized in ways that are very hard to ignore. Here's the part that makes the story hit a little differently. It's kind of the contrast here. So much of the political rhetoric around January 6th and around a lot of social issues right now centers on this idea of protecting children. You hear it constantly. Who is a threat? Who needs to be monitored? Who is dangerous? Who is corrupting society? It's a talking point that comes up again and again and again, and especially so when discussing the queer communities. Drag performers, education, media, all of it. Anyone under the queer umbrella poses a threat to children, according to these far righters. There's the narrative that that is where the danger is coming from. And then you have a case like this, where someone who was publicly framed as a victim, as a patriot, as someone deserving of forgiveness is now convicted in a case involving the exploitation of children at a very large scale. And suddenly, that narrative starts to fall apart because the threat doesn't look like what people have been told it looks like. The danger is not coming from the places that have been highlighted over and over and over again. It's coming from somewhere else. And this isn't about turning it into a political gotcha moment. It's about consistency. If the standard is protect children, then that standard has to apply across the board. It cannot be selective. It cannot depend on whether someone aligns with your beliefs or your politics or your narrative. Harm is harm, period. And the justice system is supposed to respond to that harm in a way that is consistent and grounded in reality, not shaped by optics. And then that made me wonder, what is a pardon supposed to be, right? Is it an act of mercy? Is it a correction of injustice? Is it a political signal? Why is it even a thing? Is it a loyalty reward? When you issue them broadly without clear boundaries, you are blurring the line between justice and messaging. There is no line, it's messaging. And when that line gets blurry and or crossed, trust in the system starts to erode. Now it feels less like decisions are being made based on facts and more like they're being made based on narratives. And for people watching this play out, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance that's hard to shake. On one hand, you're told that these individuals were wronged, that they deserve to be set free, that they represent something noble. And the other hand, you're seeing headlines about serious criminal convictions that have nothing to do with politics and everything to do with harm. And your brain is trying to reconcile those two things and it just can't. Your brain can't reconcile it because they don't align. So where does this leave us? Well, with more questions than answers about accountability, about consistency, about what justice is supposed to look like in practice and not just in theory. And let me just really hammer this home, okay? Let's look at the last year. The headlines on the news, newspapers, online, wherever, far right, MAGA, they keep saying it's trans people, it's drag queens, it's the gays that are posing a risk to children, that are a threat. They are the ones that are They're the ones that have a gay agenda, the ones that are molesting them, raping them, etc., etc. I could go on. You know what I mean. The reality is, and the facts are, it is more often than not straight white men, cisgender straight white men. For example, another thing I've talked about before on this podcast, Trump's former not religious counselor, spiritual advisor. Yes, Trump's former spiritual advisor was convicted and pled guilty to raping a girl when she was 12 years old. And this happened, I think it was in the 90s. He went to prison for a few months. That's it. He was released. How is that justice? He was an adult pastor, raped a 12-year-old girl, admitted to it. I believe he was the one that admitted to it during a sermon because there was a video of it. And his congregation came to his support, came around him on stage. I watched this video happen. It might not have been him. I think it was. Regardless, that's just another example of another pastor, another cis, straight, white ass motherfucker that is pointing the finger away from themselves so that the eyes are not on them. Just like school shooters, which again, I've talked about. I'm going to hammer this home. They say, oh, it was a trans shooter. What's his fucking face? What's that guy that has that giant podcast? Joe Rogan not long ago was like, all school shooters are transgender, blah, blah, blah. That's not true. That's not a fact. And let's say they were. People that commit crimes like this, whether you are committing sexual assault against a child, whether you are a school shooter, you are mentally ill. It does not matter what your gender is. It does not matter, in my opinion, what your political affiliation is. All of that is null and void and out the window when you commit a crime like this. You are sick in the fucking head. End of story. Doesn't matter if you were born male, female, transitioned, like men, like women. None of it matters. You are a criminal and you're sick in the fucking head. That's it. But more often than not, we are seeing that the people pointing the fingers are the ones committing the crime. Now we're going to stick with MAGA, but something a little less dark, okay? Part 5. Don't ya wish politics stayed out of pop? This is kind of like a little palate cleanser. Like, I'm still pissed about it, but it's a palate cleanser after that last story. So, but don't get too comfortable because it's still messy. Everything's messy. This is where pop culture meets politics. And it's given, don't you wish your band had better communication skills? So let's talk about the Pussycat Dolls because the girls are back. Kind of. Okay, kind of. The iconic early 2000s group that gave us Don't Ya and Buttons and an entire generation of aggressively confident strutting has officially announced their 2026 reunion tour, the PCD Forever Tour. But this is where the drama begins. It's not a full reunion. Not even close. Only 3 members are returning. Nicole Scherzinger, Ashley Roberts, and Kimberly Wyatt. And the rest? They're missing. They're gone. They're not invited. They found out the same way we all did, which was online. And one of those missing members is Jessica Sutta, who was my favorite Pussycat doll. Don't know why. She just was. Who she has now come forward and said that the reason she was excluded is politics. And specifically, her alignment with MAGA. And that made me a little bit depresso-stresso. So that's where the story goes from, okay, normal band drama, whatever, to like, wait, are we canceling people from girl groups now? Like, because according to Sutta, she believes that she was seen as, in her words, a liability because of her political views. And not only was she not included, she says she wasn't even told. There was no call, no heads up, no like, hey, babe, quick update, you're out. It was just vibes, just silence. And then like, boom, tour announcement drops. And she's sitting there like the rest of us going like, okay, cool. But like her cool is probably like, cool, weird. And that part alone is like a little wild to me because like forget politics just for a split second. We can't forget it for too long. This is a group that built a career on sisterhood, branding, teamwork, literal synchronized choreography. And then you're telling me we couldn't even like send a group text, like not even a, hey girl, like check your email. Sorry, like you're not invited. Poor Jessica, but also kind of not. So let's talk about the actual reasoning, because Sutta has been pretty vocal about her beliefs in recent years. She supported Robert F. Kennedy Jr. She's spoken about vaccine-related health issues. She has aligned herself, at least in part, with MAGA-adjacent politics. And in today's cultural climate, that is not exactly neutral territory. That is a stance. It's a brand. That is something that comes with very real public perception. So from her perspective, she's saying, I was excluded because of my beliefs. From the outside perspective, there's another question. Is this about politics or is this about optics? Because let's be real, the Pussycat Dolls are not just a band. They are a brand, a global touring, ticket-selling, nostalgia-fueled machine that is about to hit 50-plus shows across North America and Europe. And when you're operating at that level, every decision becomes strategic. Every member becomes part of the product. Every headline matters. So if you're putting together a comeback tour in 2026 in a hyper-polarized environment where audiences are paying attention to everything, to social media, to politics, statements, affiliations, are you making decisions based on talent or based on risk? And that's where it gets complicated. On one hand, people are allowed to have their political beliefs. Sure, that's kind of the whole point in democracy. On the other hand, actions and affiliations come with consequences, especially in entertainment, where your image is literally part of your job. Like Kid Rock and his halftime show. Nobody really gave a shit, but that was his halftime show. So now we're in this weird gray area where it's like, is this censorship or is this branding? Is it exclusion or is it business? And the group itself hasn't really clarified. There's been no official statement saying, like, this is why she's out, because there were other members that did not return either, which leaves the narrative very wide open. And when there's no clear explanation, people fill in the blanks. And Sutta is definitely filling in the blanks. She's called the tour a cash grab. Like, duh, no shit it is. Expressed that she felt blindsided and has basically leaned all the way into the idea that her politics made her the odd one out, even though there were other people, again, that were not called back for the reunion. And I think what makes this story so interesting and kind of funny in like a weird, dark way is that it reflects a much bigger cultural shift that's happening right now. Like, we're in an era where politics is no longer separate from anything. Nothing. Not your job, not your brand, not your friendships, not even your girl group from 2005. Like, we used to argue about who our favorite Pussycat doll was and who had the best vocals. Like, now we're debating political alignment in a pop reunion tour. And that is where we are. But here is the thing. Here's the gay thing. Here's the take, okay? The Pussycat Dolls are an iconic group in the queer community. I lived and breathed PCD when I was growing up. Like, the only thing I wanted to choreograph to when I was in dance school was Don't Ya and Buttons and whatever fun slutty song. Like, the amount of times I watched the Buttons music video, I watched it the other day again, like, I couldn't even count. I would be rich if I had $1 for every time I watched that. These women were so iconic for many gay people growing up when I was growing up in like the when did I graduate high school? 2006. So like 2005, 2006, it was like, it made you feel confident. It made you feel empowered. This was as gay as you could possibly get. And so I personally think if you are MAGA, you're highly likely against the LGBTQ plus community or gay rights or equality as a whole. And no, you shouldn't be invited back for the PCD reunion because a lot of the people that are going to be going to those concerts, gay men. That's it. A lot of fucking homos. And you do not get to reap the benefits from the gays paying your bills if you don't believe that our lifestyle is equal to yours. That's plain, that's simple. So while Jessica was my favorite Pussycat doll, finding out that she is MAGA made me be like, shit. This whole time, it makes me wonder, like, A, is she anti-LGBTQ? And while I was like strutting down the hallway pretending to be Jessica while I was listening to Buttons in my fucking Walkman or whatever I had at the time, it's probably like the first generation of an iPod. Was she, wherever she was in the world, thinking how terrible the gays were or being anti-equality? It just brings up a lot of questions. And so if that is the case, if she wasn't invited back for the reunion because of her affiliation with MAGA, she literally has said that she is MAGA, then good girl. You should have probably kept that to yourself. Like, you can't be that stupid. So we went from like, don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me to don't you wish your bandmate didn't have controversial political affiliations? Like, because I can guarantee if they would have come back together with like the two other girls, Carmit and Jessica, it probably would have been a bigger deal. It's still a big deal. They're blowing up. Their song is a hit. I'm into it. I'm here for it. But it would have definitely been a different type of return. But as I said, but it's the same thing as like the halftime show, right? We had a specific halftime show for the far right, which Kid Rock performed at. And then we had our regular halftime show where people that weren't bigots and racist and stupid would watch and enjoy. So now politics is wrapped up in everything, in your small business, in your big business, in your music career, in your acting career. So all in all, will she be missed? A little bit. But I think the gays are going to have a good time performing for people that maybe are not homophobic. So let's take a second and just process everything we talked about today. I'm sweating. That was a long chat we just had. If there's one theme running through this entire episode, it's that identity control and who gets to decide. We saw it with the Supreme Court reframing conversion therapy as speech. We saw it in the hypocrisy of public figures pushing one set of values while privately living as a bimbo. We saw it with the sitting president attempting to redefine citizenship. And then we had a story that forces us to confront what justice actually looks like and whether it's being applied consistently. And then we had the poor little Pussycat Doll breakdown. And hopefully we get more music from PCD because, like, I need more bops immediately. The biggest takeaway here is the conversations happening right now in the world, in America, are not abstract. They're not just political talking points. They impact real people, real lives, and real futures, whether it's your identity, your rights, or your place in this country. Those things are being debated, challenged, and in some cases, redefined. And it is a lot, is messy, it's complicado, but it's also exactly why conversations like this matter. So if you made it this far, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking a little bit deeper with me. And if you want more hot air, make sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod. Visit my website, hotairwithjoshuarobert.com, to shop my merch, submit your listener stories, and topic suggestions. So that's it for today. Stay curious, stay questioning, stay a little bit unhinged, stay sexy, stay strutting like PCD. And I will see you next Tuesday.